Hi class. Sorry it's taken me so long to make this video, but it's just been one of those weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and get right to it. There are basically two different types of loops that you need to know how to do for this week's assignment. And honestly, if you know how to do these two loops, it will take you very far in the programming world. The two loops that we're going to talk about are the while loop and a for loop. Now there are definitely other variations on both of those loops that we will probably get into later on in the class. But for now, these are the two that we need to know about. So surely you've noticed that all of the programs that we've done till now have been very linear. They do something and then they end. They don't continue to run. They just kind of write something to the screen and then you're done with them. So let's just create a sample that does that. So we're going to do console dot write line, and we're just going to say hello. And oops. And then we'll just do a console dot read. So as you expect, we run this program. It's going to, let me do that better. We run this program. It's going to give us our tag that we just said. We hit enter, the program stops executing, and it's done. Now, as you know, that's not all that useful in programming. A lot of times we want to have things repeat, and we want a program to execute over and over and over again. One of the easiest ways to do that in a console application is with a while loop. The way a while loop works is it says that while a certain condition is true, execute this code. The way you write a while loop is just by using the keyword while. Then you open a parentheses and you need to give it the condition that says what it has to check to be true. And then you enclose the code that you want to run in brackets. Let me just do some copying and pasting here to get that code up into that bracket. Okay. So let's say we want to execute this code over and over again until the user types a certain key. We can create a string variable called continue. I'm just going to call it CONT for short. And we're going to set that equal to y for now. So here in our while statement, we can say while CONT equals y, and what that's going to do is it's going to execute this code until that condition becomes not true. Forgot my extra equal signs. We need to say we're not setting it equal to yes, we're checking the equality of these two items. So we're going to say run this until that equals, or that doesn't equal y. So if we're going to do that, we actually have to create a way for the user to exit out of this. So we're going to, instead of doing a read line here, I'm going to delete that. We're going to do another console.write line. We're just going to say to exit, press X. And actually we have to read in, sorry, that variable. Okay, so I just went ahead and finished up writing that code. So basically all we're doing here is we're saying while this CONT variable equals yes, write to this hello message to the console, and then write to exit, press X, to continue to press Y. And and then we take whatever the user enters and we read it into and put it into that variable. If the user enters anything except a capital Y, we're going to break the loop. So let's go ahead and run this, and you'll see if I type a capital Y, it just runs it again and again. Oops, well, I mistyped and typed a U there, so it exited. So here, really, I can say to exit, press any other key other than Y, and it's going to exit. So a lot of times in this while loop, just checking to see if something's equal is not necessarily going to be the best way to go. You're probably going to want to have a specific key that exits. So, you know, we can say just to exit, press X. And we can actually say this while the continue variable does not equal, and we're going to say X. We want to continue to run this loop. So remember, when we use the exclamation point and the equal sign, it checks for not equal to instead of equal to. So we're still checking for a true condition. So we're saying while cont does not equal X, continue. When we first run it, we've set it equal to Y, so it doesn't equal X, and you'll see if I type in anything but a capital X, it doesn't exit. You can also use a OR operator in here, which is just two pipe symbols, and say while cont does not equal lowercase x as well. That way either capital or lowercase x. Oops, what did I do wrong? Oh, I've created an infinite loop. Sorry, we actually need to put in an AND in there, not an OR. So when we say whether it's equal to x or the other x, at capital or lowercase x, it will finish. So that's the basics of how to create a while loop. There are other ways that you can do this as far as checking for the key to escape out of the loop, but this is one of the most common ways to do it. The other type of loop that we're going to talk about is something called a finite loop. A finite loop is something that is going to run a specific number of times and then it's going to exit. The most common loop that we use for that is a for loop. For loop, the syntax is just for, then we put parentheses in, and then we write our for statement. Now the for statement is going to have three different components to it inside this parentheses. The first thing you have to do is you have to identify a counter variable. This is a variable that is going to control the loop. The most common one to use is an integer variable because those are very easy to deal with, and it's a easy way to say I want to run this loop for a fixed number of times. So the way we do that is we just declare a new variable inside the parentheses, and we do that by saying int, and then we give it a name. Probably one of the most common names that you're going to see in a for loop is I. So we're just going to say while integer I, and we're going to set it equal to a value. So we have to initialize the variable inside our for loop. So we are creating a new integer called I, and we're setting it equal to 0. Then we put in a semicolon because we need to add more code into this for statement inside these parentheses. The next thing that we want to do is we want to tell the loop how many times we want to run. So to do that, we're going to say the I variable, and let's just run it 10 times. We're going to say less than 10. And what this statement here is basically saying is while I is less than 10, execute the code inside the for loop. Then we're going to put another semicolon, and now we have to tell it how to increment once it's done executing each iteration of the loop. So what we're going to use, and the most common one to do, is I++. What this means is when it's done executing this component of the code, it's going to add 1 to I. So it's the way you read a for loop statement is integer I equals 0. While I is less than 10, add 1 to I. And that's basically what we're saying. And we're just going to run this, and we're just going to do a console dot write line, and we're going to say I is currently, and then we're just going to put in I. Oops, I. And then we'll come down here, do a console.read. So this loop is going to execute 10 times and is going to say I is currently, and it's going to tell you what the value of I is, and then it's going to exit. So we'll run that. You can see that it ran the loop 10 times, 0 through 9, and then it executed. Now it's important to note that we ran it 10 times here by starting I at 0 and saying while I is less than 10. Remember that this is, if I is equal to 10, it's not going to execute the code inside this loop. It's only when I is less than 10. You can also use a less than or equal to in a for loop, and you can see that's going to execute the 11th time. It's going to execute 0 through 10 instead of just 0 through 9. You can also increment by more than 1. You can do I plus equals 2, and what that's going to do is it's going to count up by 2s, so where I is 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So you can control the loop however you want to. You don't have to do it one at a time. You can do it as many times as you want to. You can also go the other way in this, and this can be valuable in certain situations where we could say where I is greater than 0. So we read this as integer I equals 10, while I is greater than 0, I minus minus, which means it's going to subtract 1 from I. And we run that, and you can see the loop goes the other way down. Those are the basics of a while loop and a for loop. That should give you enough information to complete the assignment if you're having some problems with it. If you have any specific questions, feel free to email me. Luckily, this week's the code was fairly simple. It shouldn't take you a whole lot of time to modify your assignment, but I am going to give you a few extra days because I was late getting this video out to you. So if you need to, you can take till Wednesday to complete the assignment. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a good night.